You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In this episode, we want to take a look back at some of the department head confirmations from 2023 that really sparked some of the energy to bring this referendum to the forefront to the voters. The story actually starts in July of 2023 when word got out that there were two department heads put in place by the county executive that were not confirmed by the county council. Now, discussions had happened in a closed session about whether or not they were likely to get confirmed, and along with the other confirmations that did come later. And it was decided these two candidates were not going to be confirmed by the county council. So rather than bring the confirmations into public open session, which is required by the county charter, the county executive simply installed these folks and then waited for the time lapse, which is 45 days at this time, to happen, and then considered them in place. And of course, the county council was not happy about this, and it actually led to an August 1st meeting when it was decided that there would be a hearing on the August 15th meeting, which is where our story is going to begin. And basically at this hearing, the county council is discussing defunding these positions until they're filled with someone who has been confirmed according to the county charter by the county council. At the August 15th hearing, Andy Mitchell, who at the time was the county council's attorney, he has since been he's since retired, and Bob Benson is now the attorney. We'll see more from him later. Introduces this legislation that is going to amend the budget that had just been passed to defund these positions. The current executive, Julie Giordano, actually speaks at the podium admonishing the county council for taking this step, and we're going to find out just why they felt like they had to do it. So here's the video now.
To remove the salaries for the Assistant Director of Administration position, the Director of Public Works position, and the Deputy Director of Public Works position.
Could we get a little further explanation, Mrs. Hurley? I know there was some Facebook post out there that said that they were eliminating salaries. We're not eliminating salaries. We're basically moving some salaries.
Yes, so the intent of this legislation is to temporarily move the funds into our use of prior year fund balance. Again, this is a temporary move until the positions can be filled properly. And at that time, council can certainly then authorize the funds to be transferred back to those departments when you guys are ready to proceed with that.
Julie Giordano, County Executive. I first want to share my disappointment in this council, as I personally sent all of you an email yesterday as a last effort to try to reach a resolution without litigation. But unfortunately, not one of you responded. It is a vengeful, spiteful act to once again try to hurt the executive office, which is what you have done for the past 7 months. Defunding positions, whether it's going back to the county, is terrible in optics, especially when 2 of the positions are currently filled. It's a form of termination, which this council does not have the authority to do. Termination is a sole function of the executive branch, except for those positions that fall under the county council, such as Ms. Hurley's position.
So we had a chance to hear the county executive speak, and up next is Bob Taylor, who is actually going to talk about how there's a history here with Bob Culver, who was the county executive in the late 2010s. And then the public gets a chance to come up and speak. And this is actually the first time you're going to hear the public ask for a referendum to replace the county executive form of government and go to a councilmatic form. This was not just brought on by the county council. This was a grassroots effort brought on by someone who took the time to attend the meetings, stand up to the podium, and make their voice heard.
For several years, I was the council's attorney, sitting where Mr. Mitchell is now sitting for many meetings. I think that the council is doing the right thing with this matter. As far as I can tell, and I do have some experience in this, because if you'll recall, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Hurley, Mr. Culver died just about 3 years ago, and that ended what is essentially very close to the same situation that we have now, with the appointment or quasi-appointment, or whatever you care to call it, of county officials by the county executive without going through the proper confirmation proceeding. That's what we have now. And until that gets resolved, I think the cutting of the salaries is the right move. The reason for that is there is no separation of powers clause in the state constitution that pertains to local government. There is a clause that pertains to state government, but not to local government. There's a federal provision as well for separation of powers, as we know.
You know, when you look at, we've had these same issues under Executive Culver with our HR director, with our lawyer. Now we're having it here with the Public Works director. If that's the case, if it's the council's push to get us back to that form of government, just put it on the ballot. Let's vote. Let's vote and say, okay, you know, years ago it was voted for the executive, whether that was for good or for bad. If that's the case, let's just put it on there.
This is where the meeting takes a little bit of a turn for the worse. James Nguyen, who's the county councilman at large, and Julie herself, who's now seated in the gallery, start to interrupt the meeting, start to be somewhat disruptive to what they're trying to accomplish. That everyone's had their chance to speak. There is a process for that, and now it's time for the county council to discuss it amongst themselves and also make their determination. At one point, James Nguyen suggests that the lawyer, Andy Mitchell, has actually led them into an illegal session because they did discuss a budgetary thing in closed session. He actually takes the time to explain to Councilman Nguyen that they can discuss it there, but they must vote on it in public and in a transparent way. So I'm going to roll to this video. I'm going to actually allow you to see what actually happened. I was there myself, and I had a chance to witness this myself. It was a very uncomfortable meeting. It was a very long meeting, but I think you would do well to see it for yourself.
Entertain a motion from council to approve.
I would like to make a motion
Entertain a motion.
I would like to make a motion to table this resolution. I think that we all need to sit down and rethink our decisions here. Why are we doing this?
I believe there's a motion.
No.
Excuse
I made a
me,
motion to
you're-
table this,
Council,
and let's
you're out
have a
of order.
discussion.
You're seriously out of order. It's not a motion to table. If you want a motion to postpone, that's fine. It requires a second. That's what you want, right? You want to
Yeah.
move this. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's a motion to postpone, not to table. If it's a motion to table, we have to bring it, we have to discuss it within this same meeting.
Right,
So it's a
so
motion to postpone.
A motion to,
Postpone.
can we make a motion to postpone, and is there a second?
We need a second.
And this is how your council votes.
The motion does not, excuse me, sir. Excuse me. So the motion does not pass due to a lack of a second.
The county council feels like its only real option in order to make sure that we get, the only real option that we have is basically to decide to pull the funding temporarily until we can actually have different nominees put forward. So
That in 2016, I believe it was, the general public had the right to vote on a referendum to approve a change to the charter. And that change in section 315 of the charter was twofold. It added, it changed from 30 days to 45 days. Wait a minute, here it is. Thank you very much. It says, that this was what the ballot question was, to amend the county charter to extend the time for the council to act to confirm or reject any appointment by the county executive of the director of administration, the head of a department in the executive branch, or a member of the board or commission from 30 days to 45 days from submission, and to require submission at a legislative session of the council. And that came about because of some issues that occurred before 2016. And that's what's happening again, is that the two names that we're dealing with were not submitted at a legislative session. So the council has never formally acted on them. It was also requested that it be a closed session by Mr. Luffman.
Per council
Thank you.
president's rules.
No, excuse me. You're out of order, Ms. Executive. You're out of order. Madam Executive, you're out of order. You're out of order. Thank you.
You've been out of order. I'd like to hear her, please. Yeah, you're hearing one side.
You're out of order. I'm sorry. You made your comments in public comment.
Would you like to
You're
come
out of
to the
order.
table
Excuse me,
and
James,
speak?
You're not running the meeting. Thank you. Okay.
Well, maybe we should change that.
Mr. Mitchell said that the closed session was requested of the council. So we held that. At no time has the county council or the president of the council ever gone to the executive or gone to Mr. Luffman and said, I know you've submitted this, but we're not going to put it on the table. We're not going to accept it. Never. So you do it in closed session. There's a reason for that. After meeting in closed session with Mr. Leitzel, the council very simply was not in favor of this appointment. We felt he was an excellent guy, a very nice guy. His background was exemplary in law enforcement, but we knew that what we were looking for the most part, was someone who could run the county, someone that recognized what it meant to run an airport or solid waste or roads or the Board of Education. There was no background whatsoever for any of those particular issues. As a body of 7 here, that is our right to make that decision. Well, no submission ever came back to the council in a legislative session. And I was kind of surprised. I'd mentioned to Mrs. Hurley at one point in time, I said, they're not advertising this job. I don't understand why they're not advertising it. Well, after a 45-day period of time, the next thing we know, it's been announced that Mr. Leitzel has been hired. And we're saying, well, you can't do that. The individual is working for the county right now, and the taxpayers are paying for this. And this council does not feel as if this is a qualified individual, despite the fact he's a very nice individual.
John, you can say it as many times, it doesn't make it true.
These are measures that we felt were taken to circumvent the county charter, the county council, and which is actually the governing document of the county, of the individuals that reside in Wycomico County, the citizens of Wycomico County.
Accepting these people, or how can she do better if we're not giving her a reason why we're not accepting these people?
I think actually she was given a reason.
She was giving a consensus not to move forward in an email during a closed session.
James, listen to the attorney.
Yes, and that contained two reasons. I know for one of them, I'm not sure about the other. And the executive responded that she understood, actually sort of took the council to task, saying that you can't have an official vote in a closed meeting, which is correct. That's why it was consensus, not a vote. And that even if it had been voted, it would not have counted.
Right.
But then she never brought it up in an open session. So that's where we are.
Our attorney that led us into an illegal closed session on the budget, that's what happened.
Now, who are you talking about?
There's no closing statement on this.
Yes,
I signed
you
minutes.
you can have a budget discussion in closed session. It happens all the time and every level. You have to vote on the budget in open session.
Well, it's on the discussion that followed on the salary cuts. I think Mr. Wynn needs to recognize that we wouldn't be where we were if Ms. Giordano had not done what she did. It's that simple. We're really back where we were with Bob Culver about three and a half years ago. Same thing.
I don't know the two candidates that were turned down by the council. Don't know anything about them. It really doesn't matter. The thing that mattered to me, and I thank the council tonight, follow the charter. The charter was put in there for a reason. That's how the rules are, and that's what's supposed to happen, and how they're supposed to be followed.
Well, we seen tonight, while we were trying to run our meeting, why we couldn't we have problems getting along. Not to say that we can't get along, why we have problems. Our meetings were interrupted by the other branch of government numerous times, our council president, other council members, when they were trying to speak. And I think Mrs. Shaney Shields made the comment, it was lack of disrespect.
I would like to say, we may all have clearly a difference of opinions, but I really do like everyone up here. me and Josh are going to go out to coffee here next week or so, and
I'm just going to speak briefly. I'm Mary Hubner, and I don't have prepared notes, but I have to disagree with the previous two speakers. I've been coming to county council just for a few months, and I've been bowled over by how hard you all work, all the amount of work you do for us. Agree on a lot of things, probably, but for the county, I think you're doing a great job, and thank you.
In the United States of America, and I believe we have the right to disagree, but it's how we disagree. I think when we have a disagreement, if I lose an argument, I move on and I don't get angry with the people that disagree with me. Because one day we'll come to a problem and be on the same page.
I have a comment. So it was mentioned tonight, or today, that the county executive and I ran our campaigns together on the campaign trail. That's true. Usually where she was, I was, James was, vice versa. We went to a lot of things together, and we did. Although we did that, people need to keep in mind if there's something that I disagree with her on, now that we're elected, I've got to make it known.
That's the folks who were there in their own words at the August 15th meeting. On September 9th is when the actual vote happens. So a normal process for the county council is they have a work session where legislation is talked about, and this is the way that they get more information. But also there is a hearing, a public hearing, where people can go up and speak. That was on August 15th. And then at the September 9th county council meeting, that's when the county council is actually going to vote. And they're voting to amend the budget to defund these two positions until they're filled with someone who is confirmed by them. Now, the money doesn't get spent anywhere else. It goes into reserves and can actually be brought back as soon as someone is hired.
And the council's act in passing the bill was to amend the budget. And if the budget is amended under the charter, if there's a disagreement about the funds, those funds go back into an operational fund. So it's not, they're not terminating employees. The council's position, at least as I understand it, is that there are no current employees that are legally hired in those positions. As such, they're not being terminated because they were never hired.
And that leads my question, is that Mr. Wilbur believes that they are legally hired. And so we're going against the county attorney's opinion. Am I wrong on that, Paul?
Paul Wilbur, county attorney. Right, that is my opinion.
Right, so that's what I was saying, is his opinion is that they are legally hired, and our opinion is that they're not legally hired. So if we defund these positions,
I take Mr. Wilbur at his word that's his opinion. I don't think it's correct. The attorney that I'm substituting for, Mr. Mitchell, had rendered an opinion, and his opinion was that they were not properly hired. I've had the opportunity to review the facts, and I don't agree with Mr. Wilbur's opinion.
The executive, after the closed sessions, the executive never requested to have no submittals at all were ever made. No requests for submittals were ever made to have those positions put forward in the legislative session. They were not made. They weren't even requested. If they had been requested, they would have been put on the agenda, no different than the 35 other resolutions and legislative bills that we passed for the executive that were submitted for legislative session.
Or just so it said, obviously, I made this point before, but if the two names that were put forward tonight, they would be shot down again.
Those positions are being taken away from those two people. How can you take away something that you've never had? Only in Wicomico County government can you work in a position that you're not supposed to be in when the county council said that you do not meet the criteria.
If the charter says that the county executive has to follow a certain pathway to nominate somebody for a position, then that's what the charter says. The county charter has to be followed, and then if it's amended, if it's changed, then something will be done differently. But in the meantime, it has to be followed, and the people who need to follow it need to do the right thing to get whatever it is they want.
I'm T.J. Mumford from Wycomico County, Salisbury, Maryland. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council. As I observed in some previous sessions and somewhat in this session, I can imagine my parents giving me this advice. My mother would say, consider the source. How credible is that source and that speaker? My father would tell me, never give in to bullies. Loudness and rudeness, and it should not intimidate you. I am proud that the council has not been intimidated and has considered the source. You have demonstrated to me true leadership. You've abided by the charter, adhered to the code, and governed under the rule of law. You've modeled leadership by listening to opposing views without demeaning the person expressing them. Your leadership is also evident in the years earning the county a AAA or AA plus with Standard & Poor's and AA with Moody's. Your leadership is demonstrated in your understanding of how to make decisions and how to preserve the quality of life in Wycomico County. You have personal integrity, and that is, it's obvious that you are serving in an unselfish manner. It reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. The wizard stood in back of the curtain and made false and misstatements of facts. The wizard might say, I got the county employees a 6% raise. You pull back the curtain, the wizard submitted a 3% raise to the council. Councilman Baker and Merritt requested a 6%, and it was passed. I brought a multi-million-dollar developer to the shore, the wizard says. Look at the trees are gone, the sheriff's department is there. Pull back the curtain. That began under Bob Culver and other council members, other councils. The wizard says, $3.5 million granted to the airport. Pull back the curtain. That came from Governor Kogan. Just because the sun rises in the morning, that does not give the wizard the right to take the credit. The Wizard of Oz was exposed to be and found to be full of bravado and misstatements. Just as in the Wizard of Oz, the council, you have showed that you have brains, you have heart, and you have courage.
It's a hard act to follow tonight, particularly Mr. Mumford, but I'll try. I'm not an English teacher, but I did get a law degree 50-some years ago, happens to be from the same law school as Mr. Wilbur. I've seen his opinion, and I will say that I do not agree with it based on the facts as I understand them. I've looked into this to some extent. I have read the suit that's been filed. You can get a copy of it across the street for a few bucks. So I'm basically in the camp of Mr. Benson and I think Mr. Mitchell. Doesn't mean we're right, but it's not clearly, I think, the way Mr. Wilbur has opined. That's just my view. Now, I think there's some other things that need to be discussed here, and that is, and he hit on them with his Wizard of Oz analogy, and that is what the county executive has done, Ms. Giordano. She's essentially tried to pull a fast one on the charter. That's where all this starts. Started back in the spring when she asked council to hold or council held a closed work session on, I think that was Mr. Leitzel. And then that was not in an open session. Then she tried to pull the idea that, oh, I really was asking that you do something in an open session then. Now, as I read the facts, that it just is not the case. So that's where it starts, and that's where I think all of her acolytes who have spoken tonight need to realize. All she had to do was follow the charter. And it's very clear how it's been done. It's been mentioned tonight, 35 or 39 other appointments. If you go back over the 3 years that I was the council's attorney, it's probably 100. And you send a letter or an email to the council saying that I'm appointing Joe Blow to XYZ, and I'd like to have it confirmed. And it goes on, usually at the next council meeting, and that's how it's done. That's how it was done when she reappointed Mr. Wilbur this year. That's how it was done when she appointed Mr. Luffman. I've seen the emails. They're public. So, I mean, let's face it, that's the situation here, and it's been blown way out of proportion by some acolytes. And they know who they are, and we all do too. requires some consideration of the county executive system. And I think it's time we look at that again and frankly get rid of it. And we can do that next year, 2024, in the general election. It has to be done in stages. You can't just do it at the end of the executive's term because there would be another election coming on then. So if you want to get rid of it, you need to start planning now because the charter has to be rewritten and that has to go to the public at a referendum, and that could be done next year with the term, her current term ending 2 years thereafter. And that's what I'd suggest you all start considering. Thank you.
The September 9th meeting, Mary Ashante, who is a longtime resident of Wicomico County, a retired educator, has been the president of NAACP in this area, gets up and speaks just exactly how she feels about these two positions. Let's hear her now.
Mr. Benson, I'm just meeting you. Thank you for your service tonight. And I thank all of you, the 6 of you, that remembered that you are here to serve the people of Wicomico County, not your party and not the county executive. You are to do your job.
And it seems like it's like a spoiled child wants her way or no way. And you can't do that in government. We're here representing the people that voted for us. And they didn't vote for us to be fighting among ourselves. Because before, the county executive was sitting beside me. Now she chooses to sit out in the audience. She was always welcome here at this table, but she chooses to sit in the audience.
And Joe Holloway comes back and he talks about how promises of campaign on the campaign trail can actually lead to some of this this type of action, not just by our current county executive, by all county executives. The interesting thing here is probably even something that county council members have felt at times, but because there's 7 of them and they must vote to consensus of at least 4-3 and even sometimes 5-2, a supermajority, they're not able to just make promises and always deliver on them. So I think it goes well to show why a councilmatic form of government has a tendency to lead to consensus and moderation in government for all sides and all viewpoints.
A lot of promises get made when you're knocking on doors, when you're at events. The big surprise comes is after you get elected and you find out that there's a checks and balances system to what how the government runs. It's just not your way. You don't get your way all the time. The county executive's office has hired the former director of administration, and I think, was it $78 an hour, something like that? Why do we need a director of administration, a former director of administration, which I don't imagine he's going to work full time, but if he did, that'd be $160,000 a year. So we got $30,000 for the director of administration. We got $160 for the assistant director for a prior.
I think for the
pardon
assistant.
127
for the assistant.
Whatever. Okay. We got the prior director of administration. Then we've got the director of administration. We got the assistant director of administration. How many directors of administration do we need? Okay. So all the conservatives out here in our county, which I can count some of you in the room, okay, worry about money being spent. When the county executive took office, she put 2 people in her office, one as I guess a legislative aide, was that correct? And then another one as a public information officer, okay, okay. Positions that weren't approved, by the way. They weren't even were they in the charter? They weren't in the charter. Yes. Okay. So she pays those 2 people out of other departments. Now, how can you have correct financing practices? And we've been through this before because this happened a few years ago out at the landfill with the situation we had out there. Where they were paying the landfill was paying county roads or the county roads was paying landfill to do something. How can we have correct financial procedures when you're paying people out of the wrong departments to fulfill a job?
From my perspective, the executive presented 2 names to the county council in a closed session. That was the request of the executive. It wasn't any type of a circumstance where they felt too intimidated to ask the president of the council to put it on the agenda in a legislative session. It wasn't a case where where it was requested and the president of the council said, no, we're not going to put it in a legislative session. Never happened. It was requested by a closed session. And that, as a courtesy, that's what the council did. They met with the executive on 2 different occasions in reference to these 2 employees. And we had a very good meeting with it. Unfortunately, the council, there were very good reasons that the council did not feel it was necessary. It was the best interest of the county to move forward with these 2 individuals. Just didn't feel they were properly qualified. That was 6 out of 7 members of the council that felt that. So, we shared that with the executive. And we're very straightforward about it. No one ever came back with us again to submit it in the legislative session, because that still is a privilege of the executive to submit it in the legislative session. That was never done. These 2 individuals were simply hired. So you have 2 people that were hired that had not been approved through the process where the county council is required to approve this. The executive made the comment tonight that one was hired as an acting deputy director, and the council didn't even have any authority to say one way or the other whether that person was authorized. Well, that's because the position of an acting deputy director doesn't exist in Wicomico County. There are no acting deputy director positions recognized in any documentation throughout Wicomico County, because there's no such thing. We recognize a director, we recognize a deputy director, we recognize an acting director. There is no recognition. This is a position that was simply made up.
The next meeting is on November 21st, and this is an interesting meeting. Bob Benson, who is now the county council's attorney, actually reads the decision by the circuit court judge that actually talks about that they sided with the county executive in the lawsuit that the county executive brought against the citizens in Wicomico County. In this briefing that he talks about, he explains how the circuit court judge has used an old version of the county charter to render their decision. And even in this current day, it's actually still in an appeals process. So it's not been completely adjudicated, but at least as of November 21st, it was decided that it was sided with the county executive. So here's Bob Benson now.
On the court filing system of the opinion entered by the Wicomico County Circuit Court in the matter between the county executive and the county. The opinion was entered by the court, and the bottom line of the opinion was that it found in favor of the county executive. But when we analyzed the opinion, it recited Section 315 incorrectly. It picked up what apparently was, well, a version prior to 2016. Filed a motion to alter or revise the opinion, but this is what I have placed in our motion to alter or revise. And what I've done in there is I've highlighted in italics, and I've also highlighted in yellow the words that the court failed to include in its opinion.
So that was Bob Benson reading the highlights of the decision made by the circuit court judge and kind of talking about what the next steps are. And ultimately, the county council did decide to appeal the decision based off the fact that the circuit court judge actually used an old version of the county charter from 2016, which was actually not accurate by today's standards. Finally, we're going to take a listen to Mr. Jim Atkins from Mardello Springs. He's been a guest on this show. He's a frequent visitor to the county council meetings. And on January 21st, he gets up, and I think in a very articulate way, he is able to kind of explain the thoughts and feelings by many folks who have been a keen observer of the county council and the county executive. Also from a taxpayer standpoint, just really how you feel when someone is not necessarily subverting the county charter, but maybe the essence of the county charter. So here's Mr. Jim Atkins.
Final item is the deputy administrator position. For months, we have heard both sides present their position on how this was handled, and everyone is entitled to their opinion if the proper procedures were followed. Perception. The citizens of this county voted for a charter amendment to have this position presented in a legislative meeting. The purpose was to allow the citizens to become aware of the person and respond back to their representatives if they had strong concerns about the person being presented for the position. One of my strongest concerns was this person did not live in the county and really didn't have a homegrown knowledge of the county. One of the concerns as a council was the process of secession if the need arises. Since the deputy did not live in the county, he would not be eligible to replace Mr. Luffman if the need arises. Everyone in the executive and legislative branch work for the citizens of the county. The citizens need to be kept informed, and not through social posts, but through county websites. Projects being discussed, undertaken, or completed need to be presented to the citizens. You can't discuss something in the council meetings and then not follow through with the results or decisions to make the public aware.
So that was Jim Atkins, in his own words, kind of tying up all the loose ends from the folks who were there to witness the confirmation process, the problems that happened, the interruptions by the county executive during some of those meetings. A lot of evasive maneuvers were having to be used just to get the county charter enforced. And as of right now, that is in an appeals process and it's waiting to be determined the final outcome. So thank you for listening to this edition of Open Agenda. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode. We'll be back next week with another episode.
I know what I'm doing, man.